Welcome, everybody, to episode 24 of the Arch City Poker podcast. My name is Tony. Alongside Nick, we own, operate, and run ArchCityPoker.com. Nick, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Excited to be here as usual.
All right. Yep, if you didn't catch last week's episode, go ahead and on the YouTube channel, you should see in the video section there that we have episode 23 loaded up. Go ahead and view that to get all caught up. And today, Nick, we're going to be talking about studying and improving off the felt. I think it's a very common thing that live low stakes players don't do hardly at all. And what little bit we could say that they try to do, it's oftentimes not communicated properly. They don't say the right things to the people that they trust, or perhaps the people they trust themselves, where they try to get poker advice from, don't have a full understanding of like proper basic fundamentals. But yeah, Nick, I think it's going to be a great topic, and we're just going to jump right into it today, Nick. And the first question I want to ask you is, when players review hand histories, it doesn't always make them better. And I'm sure we've had a lot of people explain a lot of different hand histories to us. But Nick, when somebody's going over a hand history with you, why doesn't it always make somebody better? And like, what information is missing to help them get on the right path with how to explain a hand that they played?
I think, generally speaking, I think they focus, like, the process is flawed from the start. Even how they thought about going through the hand when they were in the actual hand, like mid game. Too much focus on, we talk about this like being results oriented, not enough on, is it the right process? Did I take the best line? Did I go through the steps of thinking through this hand properly? Like, did I start pre-flop with being positionally aware? What kind of stacks do we have here? What kind of game are we playing? Instead of what kind of hand do I have, and am I entering the pot with this hand? It's like, well, where are we at in the table? What kind of stacks do we have? When I see them talk about things post-flop, it's always something having to do with their own hand, what kind of hand they flop, what kind of back doors or outs they might have. The guys that are a little more advanced or have taken their game, try to take their games a step further. It's, where I'm at in my own range, like how my range is perceived. And I think if we can get them to walk it back a little and, again, go back to pre-flop, be positionally aware, understand what kind of game you're going to be, what kind of pot you're going to be involved in with what kind of stack. Are we playing 100 big blind poker? Are we playing 50 big blind poker? Are we playing 300 big blind poker, right? And then post-flop, let's try to range our opponents as quickly as possible. Let's cap them as quickly as we can, if that can happen, of course. And that all carries over to the hand history review. And if you can think through, I think, the hand really well in game, then you should be able to carry that process over to the hand history review. And the thing is, like, off the table, guys, that's where you obviously can break down these spots, and then you can use other resources at your disposal, whether it's training site like archcitypoker.com, whether it's one-on-one coaching that we may offer, it's or whether you are using something more advanced like a solver, just to like kind of go over a spot and see what's supposed to be happening in theory. But all that stuff that we're doing off the table, that's meant to happen off the table, if that makes sense. And like, you don't want to be doing all this complicated thinking or overwhelm yourself on the table. And I see a lot of guys do that with hand history reviews, but if we can just simplify the process in both spots and try to be consistent with the process, be systematic about it in both situations, then I think that will put you guys in a better position moving forward.
Yeah, Nick. I mean, when players come up to us, and I get asked this all the time, even while I'm at the table, and people ask me, like, what's the Arch City Poker stuff? And then I tell them, and then they start talking to me about hands they played. Or while we're at the table, they'll ask me, like this happened the other night. I had somebody literally talking to me after every hand he played. How'd I do? I'm like, well,
yeah.
Like, I'll give you some pointers here, like some stuff I'm noticing, but like, can't really talk that in depth about it with everybody else there, or I'm just killing my own game, right? So,
right.
I think,
and like, it's hard to say, like, we're not mind readers. Like, we might have an idea of based on the line or the sizings, but like, we would need to, like, it's. I think the big things when I've worked with, like, the big thing for me when I've worked with students like one-on-one is I always say to them, like, can you tell me why you like, can you reason this action out loud? Like, does it make sense? Like, does it have some logic behind it? If you can't do it out loud, if you can't explain your action pretty simply put to another person, then you probably have some serious flaws in the process, Tone. And so yeah, when
Hmm.
I just chimed in because I get that all the time too, where it's like it's either something like, "Hey, do you play pocket fives for $20 pre-flop?" It's like, I don't know, maybe. Like what are we talking about here? There's so many other factors that we got to consider.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I would say players like when they're trying to review, and I would say Nick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the most common way most live low stakes players probably work on their game, quote unquote, off the felt would be telling friends or telling people that they think are better than them in the game that they're playing. They give them their own hand history reviews. That's really the extent of it. Like maybe they'll look at a pre-flop chart because someone else talked about it, but when they're going over a hand history, it'll start with like either how they lost or what hand beat them on the river or that person river two pair and like XYZ happened, but they're forgetting, like you said, like you just highlighted, they're forgetting stack sizes. They're forgetting the position. They're forgetting, did they range their opponent? What did their range look like? They're forgetting a lot of the core concepts and the core fundamentals that actually help somebody understand how to play the game that they're playing instead of just playing their favorite hand, which is Jack 4 offsuit because who knows why, right?
the
So,
Robbie. Yeah.
yeah. So
No, I mean,
that,
it's funny. I had a guy next to me today. He literally, we were playing, we were in PLO, and he was kind of talking to another player that I think is like, decently respected or whatever. And he asked, oh, should I actually have checked there? And then like I could tell he wanted to ask me, and he kind of turns, he's like, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Like, should I check there? And so it was almost like a free kind of 30-second lesson. I said, well, okay, instead of asking me, should I check there? I want you to tell me, what does checking accomplish? What does checking accomplish compared to what does betting pot accomplish? What does betting small accomplish? Like, get them in the process of like understanding, like, hey, ask these questions, and you can come up with your own answers a lot of time. And if you can, the more often you can do that and replicate that off the table and learn how to think away from the table and come up with this kind of systematic approach to where it becomes innate when you're in game, then the better off you're going to be. And so that's, I wanted to help him out for a second because he's a good guy, but he's, when they, Tone, like when they say things like, well, should I bet there or should I check there? It's like, well, what does that accomplish? And tell me, what are your other options? Like, kind of
Mhm.
tell me aloud what you think, and then we can go from there. And that's, guys, that's like a little preview of how we would possibly do it with like any kind of coaching, like outside of like the train site. Is like it's putting you guys kind of under fire and getting you to learn how to like essentially kind of do this on your own. And that's the only way that you're going to get like better very quickly, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, and I want to highlight like anarchcitypoker.com. Well, even on our Discord channel, you're going to see within the video you're watching towards the bottom, you'll see the kind of purple and white Discord logo. Within that channel that we have, it's a hand history section where we want players to highlight what their hand is, go over it, questions they have. We don't care if they won or they lost. We just want hands that are somewhat complex, or at least maybe go to the turn or go to the river or had some circumstance about it that was maybe more than just I bet they fold. And within there, we have to help guide individuals on what information we need because it'll start with like we don't know what stack sizes are, we don't know what positions are, we don't know what hand history was with this villain at the table. Are they brand new? Do you know them? Do they know you? And not that we can like really range somebody just off of that, but it could have a little bit of a factor into
It
how the
helps.
rest of the hand played. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Nick, this is going to go right into the second question, which is what should players be studying and refining before they even want to review a hand history hand? Like before they say, I limped 7-8 under the gun. And we're like, wait, hold on. What
Yeah.
what
Let's
should
start there.
yeah
Right.
what should they be focusing on to help develop their game before they're even taking that step and trying to get an in-depth analysis on the way their hand was played?
Funny enough, that was kind of a joke, but I think you said it right there. Like, I think starting with pre-flop is the biggest thing. Like, it's boring, guys. I get it. It's Like, I understand, like, when you are listening to a podcast like this, or you're potentially, let's say, let's say you're subscribed to somewhere like archshapepoker.com, and we are specializing in cash games and like post flop strategies that are tailored for these, live low stakes exploits. I get that that's the creative part, the fancy part. When we get really deep, that's where poker's more of an art form. But pre-flop, foundationally speaking, is like, it's vital. A lot of you guys, like Tony was mentioning, where you'll ask yourself the question when you're in game, or you'll ask like somebody next to you. And that's the other thing too, is like, if you're asking the guy next to you, like, should I be playing this there? Or should I be checking? Like, well, make sure that person's qualified, first of all. Like, you might be getting just bad info all the time. But getting back on track here, it's understanding, and we hammer this home so much. I don't care how repetitive it is. It's so important, guys, that being positionally aware, understanding what effective stacks are at the table. And yeah, honestly, going back through, and whether it's through our site, or if you have like some kind of, there's plenty of apps with like pre-flop matrices or charts, like understanding kind of a general range of hands that you'll want to play from. I would say, honestly, and I'm a big quantity or quality over quantity guy. And what I mean by that is, a lot of players, for example, I give them kudos, like, hey, you will go and try to study, and you'll say, well, I'm gonna study my pre-flop under the gun range. Like, I'm gonna memorize this chart, and then I'm gonna move to under the gun +1, and then I'm gonna move to middle position 1. Look, guys, if you can just look at under the gun and then the button, you can pretty much fill everything in between. Like, it's just about getting the heuristics and like understanding, like, hey, I can be wider from the button, but if I'm facing limpers, I'm probably need to be a little bit tighter, because it's probably a good chance of this going multi-way. But Tony, I think if you guys really get the pre-flop foundation down, that's where I would start first and foremost. If you can feel really good, really comfortable about your pre-flop game, and that's raise first in, that's three betting in position or out of position, adding in some four betting, like understanding if you do need that, and if you're playing like in a aggressive 1-3, or you're playing a 2-5 or 5-10, understanding the 3-bet, 4-bet, and even potentially 5-bet game, that's going to put you in a position to succeed post flop. Much like that's where like the massive advantage is, believe it or not, guys. Like, yes, some guys can play post flop much better than others, and those guys are going to have a huge advantage. But honestly, like, if you can just put yourself in more, or in a position to succeed rather than fail more often than your opponents, if your guys' skill level post flop are pretty close right now, or if you think it's like a little bit above the population, you're going to further like you're going to push yourselves further away from them, and it's going to exaggerate itself, because if you clean up your pre-flop game and you put yourself in better spots post-flop, and that's usually going to result in being in position more often, just not having as many marginal spots to deal with. That's where I would start first and foremost, guys. And then obviously we can get into post-flop stuff, and I go back to, honestly, like, how to think through hands, like how to think through decision making. Like, you don't have to sit there and just freeze up and try to memorize a chart and be like, okay, I know I'm supposed to do this with ace queen here. It's like, consider everything, like, because in live low stakes, there's a lot of different player profiles and situations where, like, just because like ace queen is like a 3-bet probably in this spot every time, like, well, what happens if you do 3-bet this particular player? Like, what if, is calling an option, and in what position are you to even, should you even be considering calling? Could you be considering folding, actually? Like, that's where we're going to try to get you guys to, is being able to just be a little more free and not so like, not so rigid and not so robotic. Like, I want you guys to be able to think through these spots, but start pre-flop. Get your pre-flop shit worked out, and then your post-flop game will flourish because of that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Start pre-flop, but it's also like understanding, like, what are basic fundamentals, like what are the categories of things I need to learn. And pre-flop, yes, but it's like, if we were to take a big step back and we're going to say, like, pre-flop, position, bet sizing, stack size, like this, like, train of things that need to be thought about when you're making any decision in a hand. So when we say pre-flop, yes, there are charts that will say under the gun +1 and +2, play these hands. Middle position 1 and 2, play these hands. cut and button, do these, small blind, do this, big blind, do this. Those are like, and we talk about this all the time, like GTO versus exploitive. That's probably more like GTO, like you are trying to have a standard to play against everybody and expecting everybody to utilize that same chart that plays against you, right? And no, like live low stakes poker is primarily the winningest players are going to have exploitive strategies, which says you're going to be utilizing that chart. So if I know that your hand ranges are XYZ, I can do this to counteract that or interact with it. But if you don't even know what the basics are, you shouldn't be opening wide from under the gun with 6-4 offsuit because you saw someone on TV do it. Just because, like, you know, whoever knows what the reason is. Maybe 10 Jack offsuit is your favorite hand. Because that's my favorite hand. 10 Jack suited is my favorite hand, but 10 Jack offsuit, let's pretend for the sake of the conversation. You open that hand under the gun and you get 3 callers. Now you're going to go multi-way out of position. But the only thing you thought about was, I want to play with my favorite hand. And you're trying to play lottery. You're like, come on, like 2 10s or 10 Jack or 7 8 9 or, you know, Queen King Ace. And you want to just flop the nuts and make the game as easy for yourself as you can. And sometimes you get lucky and that happens. But, you know, in a nutshell, if you just don't understand like why you're making certain plays, or like we talk so many times, like if we're out of position multi-way, what should more or less be our default strategy here? Or if we're in position multi-way against a bunch of people who limp call all the time, well, we can take a huge part of like that chart, so to speak, and get a little bit more aggressive with it. But if we don't understand why certain hands are to be open from early position, why certain hands are from middle position, I think it just really stunts a player's growth, because then their hand history starts off with, so I limped aces under the gun. And you're like, well, you're playing aces under the gun, which is good. The action of limping, probably not. And because you limped, it's got this cascade effect of all these different things that now happen in the hand because you limped aces. And if the result of the hand was you losing, and that's what you're focusing on, well, we're forgetting like the fundamental of like what hands need to open versus limping, because limping is not opening the pot. It's just you're limping in. You're not opening the pot up. It's just a call. So yeah, Nick, I think you nailed it. And there's just, I mean, that's a subject. It could be its own whole entire podcast episode.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no doubt.
Nick, if one of the most, we talk about this all the time, and it is technically a complicated concept, because if you're good at it, you're going to be a very successful player. But how would somebody actually learn and understand what their own range is, and maybe how that should be like engaged with the table? Like if you were to take a person who has little to no experience, maybe they're just trying to understand, like I hear these Arch City poker guys talk about my hand range. What does that actually mean, and how should that interact with the table? And does that change depending on the different type of table? What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, so simply put, like most of you, or maybe not, I don't know, maybe not most of you, but like a good amount of you, enough to where this is a topic, will just think about your own 2 specific cards from like an exploitative perspective. And like, honestly, at the end of the day, come full circle, like that's probably all we will think about when we take a lot of actions against these guys. But it is important to have a good understanding that when you enter a pot, you're not just entering like with, you know, your 2 specific cards, but like you're entering with a certain range of hands. And to some players, that if they're paying attention, that will matter, like what your perceived range is. Like there are spots where you can have, you know, Broadway heavy types of flops covered really hard, and that's typically, of course, like if you raised pre-flop or you 3-bet. Other players, if they'll think if you're just calling, or if you see somebody limping and then calling, they often are going to be wider, but they probably would be willing, or you know, probably would hit like harder on some of the lighter to middling textures if they like do in fact hit really hard. But the point is that if you can understand that you have a range of hands, and what I like to do is basically split it up into like 3 tiers or 3 buckets. Like you either have value, or you have kind of middling equity, like showdown bound hands or showdown worthy hands. And that can also include like some more like middling equity types of draws, if you will. But then you have like a 3rd tier or 3rd bucket where you have maybe some bluffing candidates, or like some like low, like really low equity draws, and then you just have air or like give ups. if you can kind of understand like where you're at within those three buckets, then that will help you moving forward in an exploitative sense where we range our opponent, figure out if he's capped or uncapped, and then understand what bucket or tier that our two specific cards are in. And that will help you figure out your plan moving forward. And your plan, it might get a little delayed. Like you might not be able to cap your opponent quite yet on the flop moving to the turn, but then maybe you do from turn to river. Typically with these games, I would say more often than not, by the turn. It kind of depends on the flop. The flop texture kind of like is the thing that guides that. The more dynamic the flop, the way more often you're going to know if your opponent's capped or not going to the turn. If it's a little more static or dry, then there are going to be some slow plays that are going to be able to hide their hand strength, whether it's via checking with slow plays, like I said, or like their sizing, like smaller sizings don't necessarily mean always weakness. So that's where it could become, like more often fast plays or you have a little bit more of a slow plays, like I was saying with like the static textures. But the point is that, yeah, if you can range your opponents, cap them as quickly as you can, figure out what tier, what bucket you're in, and then go from there. And so like the way that I'm putting it, and Tony, you can follow up on this and add because I think you agree with what I'm saying, is that I think it's important that you guys know like what kind of range you have, more for like your own sake, that you can exploratively figure out, like, do I want to play a big pot, like a small pot and not put any more money in, or do I have like kind of like a medium pot type of hand? And that's going to be based on those three tiers exploratively. Again, like based on what your opponent likely has. So it's not so much like knowing your range because it's like, oh, my opponent, like what's my perceived range to my opponent and all the GTO stuff. It's more for us. It's like, we just kind of want to figure out where we're at within our range, and then based on what our opponent has, build a plan from there. And then we can decide, usually in position, or if we're out of position, like what size of pot we want to play in. So hopefully that wasn't too all over the place, Tony. But yeah, I think it's more like, it's like a GTO concept that we're actually using more in an exploitative sense.
Yeah, I think the big kind of buzzword is like capped and uncapped ranges. I think that concept of understanding when somebody's range is capped and uncapped. So if it's capped, right, if they are just calling a small bet on the flop, maybe they call a small bet on the turn, we're usually going to cap them to maybe a one pair, maybe a pair plus draw, maybe a flush draw. Nothing too crazy. It's when they're uncapped, that's where I'd say most of the mistakes come into, because then they're betting into somebody who can have the nuts, right? And they can have just all these super strong hands that the hero just mistakenly wasn't thinking about them having, because maybe they have ace queen and like they block queens and they block aces and they have a blocker for ace king and they have a blocker for queen king, which, yeah, it's true. And that helps us with a lot of our bluffs. However, if our opponent is uncapped and they can really have all the nutty combos, all the nutty hands, and they have more of those than we do, we just pump the brakes. We don't need to pile money in against an uncapped range, against somebody who can have the nuttier combos. And I think and this is like a personal example of like an adjustment that I made in some of the games that I play, but historically, when people 4-bet in live low stakes, and I'm going to consider like 5-10 live low stakes, yeah.
It is, yeah.
But like in most cases, people 4-bet aces, kings, queens, ace, king. That's really about it. There's no ace 10, ace 5. And if somebody is doing it, you'll notice because they'll be 4-betting more than once a day, basically, right? So if I'm 4-betting with a hand like king 10 suited, king jack suited, and I'm 4-betting these people who started to 3-bet a little bit lighter with some of their more speculative hands because I'm opening more frequently, well, I have an uncapped range when I'm 4-betting against somebody who technically when they're 3-betting, they're uncapped, but because they're doing it so often and 4-bets are so uncommon, they cannot profitably compete against a 4-bet because there's no such thing in live low stakes as like a 5-bet. I mean, yes, it exists, but stacks usually aren't that deep, and if they do, it's aces. It's never anything else. So
Yep.
I can expand my range to kind of four bet and get hands that are maybe a little bit stronger to fold, but it's just understanding what my range looks like to them when I four bet. That's guys the point I'm trying to make is like
Right.
your range is understanding like I'm not taking 6-7 offsuit and I'm four betting somebody, right? Just because I saw it on a YouTube vlogger or I saw it on a live stream or I saw it in a big tournament. Like I'm four betting lightly against somebody who three bets lightly, right? I'm not four betting against someone who never three bets and I'm taking Queen Jack suited and I'm like, got him. I'm like, no. So it's just understanding like the observation. What is my opponent? What does his range look like? What does my range look like? And just understanding capped and uncapped ranges and getting yourself out of trouble. I think that'll help you go a long way, right? So, yeah, Nick, and I would say that kind of like bleeds into the next question. You talked about it a little bit with like static boards, dynamic boards, that kind of thing. But when somebody's trying to study flop situations, I mean, I guess you could say there's a right way and a wrong way. There's a way that I did it, which is I would just have a deck of cards. I'd peel three cards and I'd just kind of think about it. And I'd be like, well, is it a dry flop? Is it a static board? What do I do when it's all one suit? What do I do when it's 4, 5, 6 rainbow? What do I do if it's ace, ace, ace? And I'm like, well, how? Like I just think about all these things. So Nick, when someone's trying to study like the flop and kind of understand what different board textures mean, what the dynamics of each flop bring, what is maybe a way that you personally studied maybe flop dynamics and how you got so good to where you are?
You know what's funny is in the beginning, um, I pretty much did that, and it's funny enough. Like the old ways are still some of the best ways. Like I still, to this day, will take a deck, I will shuffle it up, turn it over, and the first two cards that are together that would be like a playable hand. Now, I'll create. I'm a quality over quantity guy. So what I do is I will create what is like the most common situations that we end up in on the flop. For example, like what position are we usually in more often than not? So like I'll create like a button versus limp call situation or a button versus cold call from like the blind situation. The other one might be like, okay, we got to practice out of position, so I'll just use under the gun and like under the gun versus like a button cold call, or maybe I add in like a multi-way situation. But the point is, I create the situation, and whether it's 100 big blind or 200 big blind effective, and then I literally get the first two playable cards for like that would be acceptable from that position based on the hypothetical, action up to my position if there was any to be had. And then I uh basically burn like two cards for my opponent and then in an actual burn, and then I put a flop out. And I practice like, okay, is this static or dynamic? What are my options here? Usually our baseline strategy would be like we just bet range and position on most textures, check range on out of position most textures, of course. But there will be some adjustments in there, and I always ask myself the questions. I put myself in these different spots. So I just want to chime in that like, yeah, Tony, that's still, I think that's a great way to honestly do it without having to have uh, pay for a training site or be on like the computer all the time. That I think it's a really good way to just sit down at a table or wherever and just learn to think through it. Like practice being in game. Like even get your phone out, or if you have a watch, and like set a 60-second timer for each street, and like give yourself a timer to and try to talk aloud out loud your options and go through them. So that's one of them. The other way would be, I mean, I'll be candid, like going through like a training site like ours, like archcitypoker.com. And like we have, it tiered off for the most part where it's like each street and you can go through. And again, going back to quality over quantity, like focus on one street at a time or one type of dynamic at a time. Like whether it's small blind three bet versus a late position raise or something, like try to focus on one specific kind of dynamic per day or study session, in my opinion. And then you can go through different flops for that specific type of dynamic. Don't get all over the place and be like, okay, I'm under the gun here and now I'm on the button and oh, this is a three bet, oh, this is single raise. Like I understand that that's how it works in game, but the only way to master each of these types of spots or dynamics, if you will, is to really just get like a lot of reps in within like that one spot, and that'll train your brain a little bit better, and you'll I think you will absorb what you've learned much more efficiently. So yeah, Tony, um I think that there is something to be said where, like, if you guys wanted to dive into like solver work and stuff like that obviously gave me like a really strong foundational background, and that's over well more than a decade, getting actually closer to closer to 2 decades, but before even solvers were a thing. But I would say, yeah, just practicing like hands and how to think through them on your own, and get a deck of cards, or use like a hand replayer and put your hand through and just go through it, but keeping it simplified to like one spot or one dynamic, and going through that one at a time each session.
Yeah, I think I think you brought up a good point. Like, solvers are great. Like, there's no mistaking it. They are great. They help you provide they help provide like a baseline of perhaps maybe what your hand in theory should be looking to do and how it should interact with a variety of boards. But again, everybody, like, live low stakes poker is about being exploitive. Like, nobody plays like the GTO solvers do, which is what they're designed to play against. And an exploitive strategy basically would take you from understanding the basics and learning how to adjust and change and put in an overbet here, squeeze here. You can maybe call a bet here because this player does XYZ, where maybe solver's like, nope, we got 3-bet this hand. It's like, not against this specific player. The other thing I wanted to highlight, Nick, is you brought up, as far as understanding how the flop goes and like really taking 3 cards out, putting them down, and understanding what the board texture looks like. I think that goes all the way back to understanding like what the fundamentals are. Like, if think about if you're listening to this podcast and we peel 3 cards and it's 2 spades, 4 spades, 7 of hearts. What are you seeing? Is that static? Is it dynamic? Is it, how does your range want to interact with this? If you're out of position multi-way, if you're in position multi-way, just grab 2 cards that you would play. Like Nick said, he'd peel 2 cards until like they were, remotely playable. He's not just taking deuce 7 offsuit. He's like, all right, let's see how we interact with the board. Right. He's taking like legitimate hands. And we just think about, how does our hand interact with that? And against a limp caller on deuce 4-7, well, maybe we think about it a little differently versus somebody who's 3-betting or 4-betting, or maybe they limp jammed, right? Like all these crazy things that we see in live low stakes games. But yeah, Nick, I think you nailed it on the head, but it just takes repetition and practice. And I think even if you have a solver, you still need somebody or people or a group or a community to work with to like help you figure out how to use the solver effectively. How does the solver interact with the games that you play in? Because you can customize those things. And that's where we say archcitypoker.com is fantastic, because we can talk about those things. We can talk about them in the general chat. We can go over hand history analysis. If there's a question you have on a learning management video that's a specific module, maybe there's a topic of discussion that we covered, but maybe it didn't quite resonate with you, or maybe it left you feeling like you had some more questions, or you're trying to take the information on the LMS and put it into your own game, but there's some like questions that you still have. Well, that's what the Discord's for, and that's where we will talk to you at length. Like, we'll have great conversations about a little more expansion on the topics that were in the videos that you kind of learned about. So I think that those fundamentals come best from a training site like ours. I'm not just saying that because like we are Arch City Poker, but like that helps you get your fundamentals right. It gives you community to talk to kind of help plug up some of those leaks. And then you can incorporate a solver into it and be like, okay, I'm going to customize this thing based off the knowledge that I have and the games that I play in, and kind of take my game to the next level. But yeah, Nick, so that's going to lead us right into probably a more complicated question, or maybe a question that is, there's not a right or a wrong answer. It just comes off of someone's personal circumstances. But how should a live low stakes player structure study time each week? Because I would say more often than not, the most common player is not trying to get better. And maybe they have started to wanting to get better because they're sick of losing, or they're sick of the bad player, quote unquote, at the table always winning. But the free time that they do have, they want to spend it playing. And maybe they're like, I don't have time to study. And it's like, well, you do, but the priorities aren't there. Like, you don't understand what you're supposed to study, perhaps. But how should somebody maybe structure their study time or kind of even approach the idea of studying off the felt?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it um in a vacuum there where it's like I mean, honestly, I think for the most part, like the vast majority of low stakes players never study. If they do, it's usually in the form of like seems like society has moved towards this like incredibly short attention span type of content where you have like the shorts on YouTube or TikTok stuff, or you see like little clips from the Hustler, things like that. And that's fine and all. Like you get some reps and you get to see some things. But I think as far as like getting actual study in or yeah, like actual study in to where then it's applicable in your next session or upcoming sessions, like I mean, you're gonna have to like cut out at least some time, whether it's hey, we don't watch that second episode of whatever you're streaming or binging or and I understand like we've always been like the kind of site and instructors where like we are young fathers ourselves. Like we understand that there are jobs, there's things like fatherhood or even if you don't have kids and you have a significant other or you have shit like a dog that like you tend or you spend a lot of time with, like it doesn't matter whatever the case is, like we get it, we are living it, we get it. But if you seriously want to get better, like there's no excuses, like you just need to put in some time. And so whether it's signing up, honestly, and I know, look, guys, like I know it seems like we're shilling it, but like we believe in it. And so like if you want to get better, like sign up for like artshittypoker.com and spending, and it doesn't have to be like 2 hours a day or something. It doesn't even have to be like daily. Like if you can find time to cut out even just 30 to 45 minutes, it doesn't have to be that long. Even if you have only like 15 minutes in a day, like our videos are designed to where like I've literally we have some videos ready to upload now that are not even quite 10 minutes, and like they're just quick little like easy to follow strategies or foundational pieces that really can get you in the right mindset, but it's also like just really applicable stuff for your next session, and that's the whole goal. But like we said, being able to use like content from a training site like that, being able, like we said, take a deck of cards, like learning how to think through a hand is the most important thing for you guys. Like being able to come back to a systematic approach that you can repeat in each spot to fall back on. If you can do that, then you don't need to spend 3 hours a week or whatever with a solver. Like you don't need to spend $200 a month for a more advanced training site that like with stuff that's just not going to be applicable to the games that you're in. Like we're talking about, having study time or sessions and the kind of content that you're going to study, or having a deck of cards and just learn how to think on your own. We're talking, just a little bit of time, hopefully each day. But if you can't do each day, then just a little bit of time weekly and just trying to find, like I said, narrow it down to like one spot that you're not comfortable with at first. And it could be everything. Then start pre-flop, guys. Start from the foundation pre-flop and work your way through each street. Like it doesn't make any sense to look at like spots on the river if you don't know what the hell you're doing the 3 streets prior to that. So try to follow everything in order. Let's say you have like a specific spot that you're or kind of board that you're really struggling with in the flop, then go through that. Like go through that. Like we very likely have something, some kind of content that covers that on the site. If we don't, come in the Discord, let us know. I'll cut out a video for like the next day or something. Like it's not that difficult for us to do that. But you can also just, like we said, fall back on, get a deck of cards out, put that board out and go through with different hands in that spot and just try to think through what you would do if like you take an action and then your opponent follows through with an action themselves. And if you're not sure and it gets overwhelming or complicated, that's where you come back to us and that's where we'll help you. So yeah, guys, keep it simple. Quality over quantity. Don't try to, like, you don't need to do 2 hours a day. Just narrow your focus, short blocks of study time, and try to master like one dynamic or one situation. Just get, and not even master, just get more comfortable with that until you feel like you're getting closer to a level of mastery. That's when you then cover to artshittypoker.com, sign up, and then we will push you over the edge to mastery for these live low stakes games.
Yeah, and I would even, Nick, we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, but like most live low stakes players, I think, well, not most, but some who maybe don't have a lot of time and they finally have a day where they can just play cards, they'll put in a 10, 11, 12 hour session. Like I've seen people put in these like big long sessions and then they'll brag about how long they were playing, but in like reality, they stopped playing good poker at hour 7. And I say good poker loosely. We're for the context of what we're talking about, good
Sure.
poker.
Yeah.
And I even find myself like, yeah, when I was younger, I could probably put in some longer sessions with more quality play, but I would say even nowadays, I think 8 hours for me is like a good solid session of like consistent paying attention, like making quality decisions. Don't feel like my brain is too tired is like the amount for me. And everybody's going to be a little bit different, but just understanding that once you get to the point when you're playing cards that your decisions are falling off a tree or are falling off the cliff and you shouldn't even be playing anymore, like there's an error there. There's some time where maybe before you start playing, you can like kind of get your mind ready and go over some like very basic concepts. Or at the end of your session, you can simply just go over your hand histories, go on to Discord, archcitypoker.com, hand history reviews, go over those hand histories. And you don't even have to remember everything, like every single hand that you're involved with, like just the things that made you think there's a question, you weren't sure what to do. There was a really interesting spot that happened. Maybe you won a big pot, but you weren't quite sure if you played it correctly. And it's not just like the times that you lose, or excuse me, not the times that you win. Like everybody at some point is going to win a big hand of poker, either by a purpose or accidentally. It's the ones that like we have questions on. Like we don't care about, like bad beats are going to happen, but the stuff where you just weren't sure if you made the right play, you didn't know if your opponent was capped or uncapped, you're trying to go over a hand history, but you can't remember stack sizes. Maybe that's a leak because you weren't paying attention to them. Like there's just a million billion things when we're talking about like how studying should look like, how often we should do it. And I think my personal opinion on the topic, Nick, is probably like bank out, like cut out a specific time frame of like what you're going to play. And either on the front end or the back end, it's like stretching before and after a workout. Either go over some stuff to kind of get your mind in the right place beforehand, like listen to a podcast, our City Poker podcast on the way there, go over some basic fundamentals to make sure that your brain is thinking cards, or when you're all done with the session, just kind of sit and recap. If you're if you're playing bad cards, don't compound it with a bad decision and be like, I'm going to go to Taco Bell after I play cards, because it's just, you're playing bad cards in the poker room. Don't make bad decisions. That's going to translate the bad decisions outside the card room. So do your best to kind of control your emotions and be a little robotic about like come in with intentions and execute. It's just like when you're in a hand. That's my personal opinion. It's not right or wrong. It's just kind of like what I like to do.
No, I mean, to add what you're saying, I have 3 quick points that I needed to write these down because I didn't want to forget them. So, and it relates to everything you just said. Guys, like your quick study session could come in the form of a warm-up pre-session. Tony mentioned it. Like you can do what we said, where you take out the deck of cards, or you get on archcitypoker.com, you watch like 1 to 2 videos max or whatever. Get yourself in the right mindset for, to go into your session to set yourself up to succeed. The other one is when you're in game, when you're mid session. Tony mentioned this, how like this is true even for like elite players. Like there's just a certain time where like your play's going to start to fall off. You're not going to be able to play like your A game for like 14 straight hours. So a lot of players will ask me, well, when will I know that? Because like sometimes it's really easy to know, but other times it's not. I would say, typically in my own experience and with guys that I've worked with, that the moment that you stop thinking through hands, like we've talked about this entire episode, in the moment that you are thinking about like how card dead you are, or how nice it would be to like for your hand to like hit and win a pot, like some guy just did with his hand, like he's, oh, like this guy's hot and he's like hitting everything. Like the moment that those thoughts start creeping in, and almost like, I hate putting it this way, but like it's just the truth, guys. Like it feels like the moment that your brain starts bitching and stops thinking, that's the moment that you probably should just go home, to be honest. So try to continue, like push yourself to think through these hands, and not like in an overwhelming or complex way, the way that we're teaching you how or suggesting how. And when you start to realize that you're starting to slip there, it's just not quite happening, that's probably time to go home. And then for post game, like Tony was mentioning, like if you guys like try to like record some spots mid session and then have them ready because they're fresh and they're in your notes, put them in the Discord, and like we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But you don't even need to like try to get through this right after the session. Like give yourself time to like decompress, go live your life, like go have fun, do other stuff, like be a husband, be a father, be a wife, like whoever, man or woman. But like the point is, like, it doesn't need to be 24/7 poker. Decompress, come back, and then we can look through. You or with our help can look through like a hand or two, and figure out some stuff from that session to improve upon for the next one. But yeah, guys, like the biggest thing is like in game, like as soon as you are just thinking like, man, it'd be nice to like hit this hand or whatever, that's when you probably should like just pack it up. Like you need to just know, like, continue to think through these hands, and you'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, and don't get it twisted. I have those thoughts too, and I'm sure Nick does.
Everybody does.
Like we're not saying these things because like we've overcome the being card dead phase. Like that stuff happens all the time, and I'm like, if I can just have a hand at this table, I'm gonna crush it. And sometimes that never happens, right? So instead, I'll just like take a break and like we play at a casino, and I'll take a couple laps. I'll maybe order some food, and I'll maybe take a little 10-minute, 15-minute break and eat it. And just kind of chit chat, like Nick likes to chit chat with the dealers, right? Like everybody has their own thing.
I call them the coworkers. I like to go harass them, and I mean, as their union rep, I got to go protect them as well. So I like to go harass the floor. So
yeah, but
I'm a man of many hats. Yeah.
But everybody deals with it differently. So like we experience the same things you do, and Nick's right. If your brain is turned from analyzing poker hands to just trying to win a lottery ticket, maybe that's when you need to maybe take a break. But yeah, Nick, that's going to wrap up episode 24 of the Arch City Poker Podcast. Any final words or thoughts for the audience?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, guys, we implore you to come over to archcitypoker.com. If you're serious about getting better, I mean, we're very happy to provide these podcasts for you. I mean, we're 24 episodes in now, basically. It's a lot of great content. I'm going to continue to, or we will continue to put out really great content on YouTube for free because we think that's important for the community. But if you guys are definitely serious about improving your win rate, becoming a better player, come visit us over at archcitypoker.com, and we will get you to a point that you want to be.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up episode 24 of the Arch City Poker Podcast, How to Study Off the Felt. Again, my name is Tony alongside Nick. We own, operate, and run archcitypoker.com. Head on over if you're a first-time viewer, and if you're watching this YouTube video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day.